Kerapac is not a boss that I farm out in large stints for thousands of KC at a time, but I do enjoy running through a Slayer task or two here and there. And in my recent stint of Kerapac, I have changed my method up once again for doing mage melee hybrid. And today I'll show you what I've changed at hybrid Kerapac and how I'm getting low 2s and sometimes sub 2s if I'm feeling a bit spicy. So let's go ahead and get into this guide. Now I assume someone who is looking for a Kerapac hybrid guide doesn't need an endless explanation on perks and all the gear, so I'll just do a quick rundown here of the gear. The only noteworthy thing perk-wise is you have Genocidal somewhere on your kit. Here I happen to have it comboed with Biting, and on the magic gear I have it comboed with Invigorating. And for setup, it's pretty bog standard hybrid stuff. I have a Grim best in slot. I have my Dragon Battle Axe equipped so I can use the spec at the Adren Crystal. In the quiver, I just have Hydrix bolts for Hydrix Gricko. Reaver Rings, definitely nice for getting as much crit chance as possible. And in the EOFs, I have the Dragon Claws, I have an Iban Staff, and I have a Dragon Sim. If you don't want to run a Dragon Sim inside of an EOF, that's totally fine, but I do like the damage that the spec can give, so I would recommend finding an EOF for it or just swapping out one of your other ones that has a very cheap special attack in it. And we are back to using elite tech here at Kerapac because we have the 6% crit chance and we get all of the magic damage bonus, so it is just the best of both worlds. Definitely run the elite tech. Your Sliske can go into the dead content gear tab. You don't need that anymore. And for weapon swaps per style, I keep it relatively simple. I have a dual wield, I have the two-hander for each of the styles, and then I have a Gricko swap, and that's about it. Now, obviously you don't need an ECB for a Gricko swap. You could use something like a Wyvern crossbow or a Royal crossbow I've seen used, just something so you can get the Hydrix bolt proc on your Gricko. I do have a Blessed Flask in here. Powder of Penance does keep up pretty well here, but I bring one just in case, mostly for phase 1 to phase 3, although I've been finding myself not using it nearly as much as before. Now I do have my rune pouch set up for Temporal Anomaly, but honestly I'm not going to be using that here. I will be using the Darkness incantation, or the Darkness aspect I should say, and I can't think of a spell where I need time runes, so I should probably switch these out. I would just go with a standard rune pouch setup. And other than that, I have an overload. I have a weapon poison triple plus. That is just so I can keep right clicking load last preset on any bank that I go to and just replenish those buffs as needed throughout the hour. Now the elephant in the room is, why am I using prayers instead of curses? And well, simply put, if I turn on Divine Rage and I turn on Piety and hit this here to show the stats, we are at plus 13% melee strength, and it's the same if I swap over to Augury. We are at 13% magic strength. Now the magic accuracy and melee accuracy respectively are lower than with curses, but we're going to be on Slayer task, and for the echoes we're going to be using melee and have a DSim for that, so we can get away with using the normal prayer book because we want that extra percent damage, but that is not the main reason we want to use this. The main reason is for this prayer right here, Eclipsed Soul. This gives us an additional 4% crit chance and helps even out some of the bad RNG that we used to get on the old curses setup. And since phase 1 through 3 we essentially take 0 damage and we want to juice the relic a bit more, the healing from this prayer can keep up with phase 1 through 3, and we're just going to throw on Protect from Magic in phase 4 anyway, so it's honestly no harm no foul. We get the free damage, there isn't really any consequence for it. And gear and setup wise, that's all there really is to it. For relics, I'm using a pretty standard setup as far as current PVM goes. We're running Zerk Fury, Font of Life with Conservation of Energy. And I want to take the time in this part of the video to kind of talk about the big picture ideas before we get into the example kill, or maybe a couple kills depending on what I record. And that is, big picture, the only thing we're really changing from my old guide is, instead of using Berserk to deal with the Clone 1 and Clone 2, then using Sun and Metamorph to deal with Clone 3 and Kerapac, We'll end up using an easy K spec P1, so that way on phase 4, when we're dealing with Kerapac at the very end, we have a 120k free delete button essentially to just smack Kerapac directly into the ground. And so it'll be Berserk P1, use Sun and Metamorph together on phase 2, Zerk phase 3, and phase 4. Now there are a couple points of minor inconsistency I've noted so far from doing this new setup, and this is the case when doing anything PVM wise with hybrid. You're always going to deal with the fact of sometimes you get crits and sometimes you don't. If I can find some examples in a VOD, I might throw them up here while discussing this, but suffice to say, sometimes you're just going to get bad crit RNG. Even with Grim, even with Calg, the elite tech set, the normal prayers giving the additional 4%, sometimes we're just gonna get screwed. And on phase 1, if you get very bad crit RNG, honestly, it's phase 1, I would just teleport out and start the kill over. There isn't too much of a loss in terms of kills per hour of teleporting out phase 1. Phase 2, if you get bad crit RNG, there are backup rotations that you kind of improv. And essentially what you're going to be doing is if you get a minimal damage phase 2 with magic having Metamorph and Sunshine stacked in it, you can essentially use phase 3 Zerk to just kind of clobber damage in order to make up for it. But if you get a very good phase 2 and you ideally will be phasing on a G-Conk, I think once the Time Warp pops, an ideal phase 2 should last 3, maybe 4 abilities. Essentially, if I get a really bad phase 2, all I'll do for phase 3 is Chaos Roar into D-Claw instead of Chaos Roar into D-Scimitar. And if you get bad RNG on these phases, your phase 4 will be a little bit slower and you might have to do some damage on Clone 2 without Berserk at all. But it ends up working out just fine because we are going to do a second Time Warp in phase 4. And I understand this might be hard to visualize. Hopefully I was able to find some examples. But I think we need to just stop yapping at this point and get into an example kill or two. Alrighty, let's go ahead and run an example kill. So make sure our darkness is on. For aura, I'm going to be using Majorat because we want that 5%. But let's actually go ahead and do a kill. So we'll start off with a Dragon Battle Axe spec, grab some adrenaline, click on the dummy and hit Incendiary, then just run back to stall it. Then we'll go ahead and go through the portal. Dive as far as we can, drop the combat dummy, target cycle, smoke cloud, and natty for the release. Gricko, anticipate, Zerk, surge one tick after, barge, chaos roar with the A-pot, dive over, thaw claw, and release with assault, and hit another couple claws here. I'm going to smoke cloud, 4 ticket in with a G Fury, hit an overpower into a meteor strike and run under. Gricko, we got good adren there, just hit an easy K spec into a smash, into a punish there, and just build up with magic. Time warp and sun, and then we'll go ahead and Gricko and re-equip our staff, hit a G-Conk, Nami, into an FSOA spec, into a T95 1 spec, run under with Metamorph, run back out with a auto G-Conk. And then there, I hit Wild Magic because I didn't think I was going to get the Adren, but let's go ahead and Omni Power after that. Do a couple of abilities and just charge a Detonate. And then once his arm goes up like that, you can release the Detonate. Then maybe G-Conk into an Iban and Tendrils. Run under, anticipate, Time Warp Berserk, and Barge. Go ahead and hit a Gricko, bleed the assault. Need to do a bit of damage here, so I'm just gonna Chaos Roar into a D-Claw. And the D-Sim there happened to clear it. We'll click here, and then target cycle Barge, bleed the assault, and then here's where I'm gonna Leng spec. And then just overkill with a Hurricane. Dive over and hit Overpower on this guy. And then we'll just use basics to build up here. We're just waiting for Time Warp, honestly, to come back, so we don't have to hyper kill this Echo. And I'll just dive over here, hit Time Warp and Zerk, use my disrupt shield, and then barge, devotion, whatever threshold's available to bleed, and then chaos roar into a claw. Equip my easy K, barge over chaos roar easy K spec into a couple claws, and that should be kill. And it is. Not too bad on loot, but I definitely need to now talk about some of the backup rotations I have been using. On average, this method that I've been doing has been seeing anywhere from 202s, 203s to about the 207 to 209 mark. If you want to go really fast for a sub 2 timer, you would end up skipping the time warp done on the North Echo over here and just trying to blitzkrieg all of them on a Rezerk and maybe time warp for some abilities again on either Echo 3 later on or on Kerapac himself. But I like doing the second time warp because it allows me to have the devotion. I can then possibly double devotion if really needed, but it feels like a pretty safe rotation. And Zerk runs out here, so I'm not taking too much damage in general. And when I start taking damage on this Zerk, I use my disruption shield to null one of the 2, possibly 3 magic hits that's going to hit you. Sometimes darkness will also help out. That's also where I try and eat up, is on the second Echo. But other than that, that is a pretty average looking phase 4. Now where the backup rotations are really going to come into play is, like I said before, if you get a crappy phase 1, you get 0 crits, you might as well just teleport out and restart. There's not too much harm in your kills per hour doing that. And going into phase 2, when I hit time warp and do sunshine, I will always do Gricko, G-Conk, Nami, FSOA, and T95 wand spec, regardless of the fact if I get a relent proc or good adren or bad adren. If I get really bad adren or I can't get the wand spec off, which is like it happens like maybe 20-30% of the time when I do that. The main culprit being me just accidentally leaving the protect from magic on and not getting the 4% crit chance. I will use something like a combust or a corrupt blast in place of the wand spec, so I can try and maybe get a wand spec refresh later on if I get really good adrenaline from my auto G-Conk into Omni Wild Magic. Now my typical order there after the time warp refreshes and I press Metamorph is G-Conk or Auto G-Conk, because when you press Metamorph, that counts as a like non-combat ability. It doesn't count for like the autos coming out on the tick system. It basically refreshes, and so you don't have to 4-tick in a staff auto with your next input. You can just press it on tick 3 and it'll go through just fine. So with G-Conk, it is quite literally a free auto attack, assuming you remember to press it. And that auto can crit, which is helpful for averaging out the number of crits you get per kill, thus making it a more consistent rotation. So I do recommend doing a auto attack with the G-Conk just after you metamorph on phase 2. If you get a bad phase 2, you can forego the Iban staff spec and just try and get out a couple of G-Conks, maybe a 2-hit fix, and the Tendrils. The Tendrils is the important one after you release the Detonate and Tsunami. And if you have to use a lot of Zerk damage phase 3 and your Zerk timer is starting to run out, as long as you kill the first Echo relatively quickly, you can sit on this second one with no Zerk at all, just using your thresholds and whatnot. I still would use the Overpower. I would use Punish when possible. I would also use things like a full flurry and destroy just to help get out a little bit more damage, because you do have a decent time window until the time warp comes back. And if you happen to have a lot of adrenaline, maybe you could do something like an early time warp, but I haven't experimented with that. If you have, let me know in the comments below. But typically on phase 3, if I have a really good magic phase 2 and I can really carry some of that magic damage into the phase 3, all I'll really do on my initial Zerk is barge, bleed the assault, chaos roar, and maybe just have a chaos roared DSim. Again, I would recommend having it inside of an EOF because, as you saw, it is very nice damage. on phase 3. And those are kind of the things I have found so far with this rotation. Once you get into a flow of things and you kind of know what to look for as far as doing backup rotations and playing with the RNG that you get, you're able to improv kills, and the highest you should ever see a kill on this setup go is maybe in the 220s if you just get absolute horrible RNG on all of your crits. But with this method, I have found that even on low RNG and early in the task kills, because genocidal isn't built up, I'm still able to improv my way through and get pretty good kills per hour here. I think 1 hour so far I've seen as high as maybe 18 or 19, which is not bad in the slightest. And there are some faster rotations out there to make hybrid go into the consistent sub 2s, but I haven't found a terrible amount of luck with those. But for now, I am going to call the video here. Thank you very much for watching. Your viewership is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next guide. Peace.